In the quiet darkness of Mr. Cart's cabin, Varuna blinked. It was a long one, not an involuntary movement, but a deliberate way of checking if she wasn't completely losing her mind. Then she moved her hands in front of her face, and when she confirmed that she was still in control of her own body, she took a step forwards towards her boss and said,
"Boss, where were we just now?"
"In my room," he replied unhelpfully. She replied with several unpleasant words, ending her tirade with,
"You cryptic motherfucker,"
but decided to not push him too hard, at least for now. This trick clearly cost him a lot. The man was breathing heavily and medical monitor on his suit was showing rather concerning numbers. Apparently, breaking laws of physics took a heavy toll on Mr. Card's body. Instead, Varuna approached her situation in a remarkably cold and reasonable manner, which meant she reverted back to her Tritakian training.
"Okay, we're in hyperspace, that I can tell, so whatever you did worked, and it looks like we've been gone for less than a second, but in that case, why did it feel longer? And why do I remember singing?"
"My fault, I think," her boss replied, unplugging all the cables from his suit.
"Yeah, I'm pretty sure you don't sing like that, old man."
"It was, an old friend. Helps me focus, I think. Look, in all honesty, I don't really know how that works either. They never explain it when they teach it to us."
"So it's something from back then?"
Varuna asked, and when he nodded, her eyes narrowed.
"So that means you knew how to do that all along, even back when our old fleet was ambushed. Then why the hell didn't you use it to escape back then?"
"'Cause it's not that simple. Short version, we didn't have proper equipment and enough time back then. Long version..." He tried to explain. Varuna tried to understand. But unfortunately, whoever put the practical knowledge in Mr. Cart's head didn't bother with explaining theory behind it. He asked Midnight Dissonant if she knew something about it, but the AI was unhelpful, and, in fact, seemed rather concerned with the whole affair.
"Please inform us beforehand if you plan on performing such an action in the future,"
she said, sounding slightly dizzy, if an AI could sound like that.
"We would prefer to not experience it again in fully functional mode. It was the most illogical experience."
And on that, they could all agree. Even now, a few minutes later, hair on Varuna's neck was standing upright, and she felt a chill running down her spine. Whatever her boss did was not right, but of course she wasn't the only one who noticed it.
"So, what are we going to tell the crew, boss?"
she wondered.
"Hard to explain breaking laws of physics by itself, but if they all felt as weird as I did, then they're bound to ask questions."
"Maybe we could tell them it was some top-secret tech academy gave us. The way I hear it, most of the sector consider Galatia to be filled with sorcerers anyway."
"Could work. Zala won't buy it though, Disco too, and if they won't buy it, House won't too, and the Luddics, well, they're gonna be livid."
"They're always livid. Comes with their religion. But we'll deal with that problem when they start asking questions. For now, we need to get the hell out of here. If this researcher is really as important as the Provost made her out to be, then Tritakion will be sending all of their fleets this way soon. We'll go home the long way. And speaking of, go check on our guest, would you?"
"I'm fine, thank you,"
a chipper voice from behind them said. Both Mr. Cart and Varuna turned around slowly, realizing that this woman just waltzed into Boss's private sanctuary like it was nothing. She didn't seem to care about this trespassing though, and instead erupted into an overly excited rumble.
"That was amazing! The jump thing you just did, it was amazing! It was like you just took all laws of reality and told them to go and take a hike! I had no idea it could be done, and you just went poof and did it! If that's how the Academy tries to impress me, then damn, they should have done so sooner. I wouldn't waste my time on that barren rock back there."
She wanted to keep rambling, but she finally noticed cold glares of her hosts, which finally shut her up.
Is something the matter?"
"Yes, miss," Mr. Cart said, trying to sound dismissive, but in his head he was panicking. How the hell did this woman go through his security without him noticing? He silently mentioned Varuna to go and take a look at the door, and she did just that. "You see, the doors to this room are closed for a reason, and I don't really appreciate unexpected visitors."
"Oh, Well, they were not locked when I got up. Seems like a lot of the fleet is on the fritz right now. That jump must have sent some powerful current through all systems when we breached into hyperspace. And yes, you have to tell me how you did that, unless... Wait, let me guess. That was like a tease from you, right? The Academy wants to show me what they can do, but not before I fully commit to them, right?
Yes, right, that, Mr. Katz said. This is all Academy business, miss. We're just a delivery crew. So, if you don't mind, allow my lieutenant here to escort you to the medical for checkup. That leg doesn't look too good, he added, pointing at a bone sticking out a few centimeters below the knee. The fact that this woman was standing and talking coherently was a miracle, or, as he now noticed, probably an effect of adrenaline and a whole lot of painkillers she must have taken before her desperate escape. Her eyes were darting all over the place, and she was shaking so hard she could probably generate energy to power a small spaceship. Varuna noticed that too, now that she locked the door manually, and approached the scientist, gently wrapping her arm around her.
"Come on, I'll get you to a doctor, miss,"
she said calmly, as it was clear the woman's shape was rapidly getting worse.
"But before we go anywhere, I need to ask you to not mention to anyone anything about this room, and about the boss, understood?"
The runaway looked at Varuna questioningly and opened her mouth, but the lieutenant cut her off and continued.
"You see, the boss, as you can see, has quite a lot of implants. Said implants tend to be expensive, and some people would not be against killing him to lay their hands on them. So do be kind and forget you have ever seen him, and don't mention him to anyone, okay? Even our own crews." "Gotcha, sister," the woman said with a bright, slightly unhinged smile. "Trolls, am I right? Show them something shiny and they'll kill you for it. Have a few implants myself, like the one that's releasing painkillers to my brain right now. And on that note," she said, and slapped herself in the side of the head several times. "There. Now that's better. Wait, that's way too much for someone my weight. Oh dear. Yeah, that medical place thing. Yeah, that sounds good." She gave Varuna a blissful smile. "You're pretty," she said, and she drifted away into a realm of drug-induced unconsciousness. The boss chuckled quietly at that, while Varuna sighed heavily and carried the scientist out, locking the doors behind her. And while there were indeed many repairs to be done around the ship, that jump really did a number on a lot of subsystems, Dr. Disco's medical bay was mostly functional, and he was able to start patching the runaway up right away. Like everyone else, he had questions about this sudden shift from real space into hyperspace, but fortunately, the Academy did it, proved to be a good enough explanation for most people. The Luddites complained, of course, claiming that this was some techno-satanic devilry, but Zala did her best to keep them calm, even though she herself was not exactly sure how to feel about this sudden change of laws of physics that this unexpected jump was. Aside from that, Varuna spent the next few days spinning stories on how the Provost handed them some unknown piece of equipment and told them to use it in desperate situations. But in her spare time, she grilled her boss a bit more about that, and learned some new things about him, and other things, in the process. She didn't have much time for casual conversation though, for even though most of the crew members bought the Academy did it story, there were still many hushed whispers and rumors circling around the fleet. And so the lieutenant had her hands full keeping everyone in line, so that the company could get back into action and return to Galatia over a longer, roundabout, but much safer route. Because, even though the researcher defector has been secured, the Academy still had some jobs for CART Logistics to do, and the company decided that now would be a good time to delay their return to the core for as long as possible, and focus on those assignments in dark, uninhabited space. Now, these jobs were nothing special, or at the very least, nothing that the company hasn't done before. A scan here, an exploration mission there, the usual. All these jobs seemed completely disconnected, and quite frankly pointless, as even Midnight Dissonant couldn't figure out just what exactly the Provost wanted to accomplish by, say, deploying probes in a random asteroid field, far, far away from the core systems.
Perhaps it was a part of some really important and complicated experiment, the kind that only Galatia would be able to conduct. Or perhaps, as Captain House thought, it was nothing more but a smokescreen, sending the company on a great many assignments to create many conflicting leads for prying eyes, while only a few of them were actually important. Still, they all paid quite well, so no one complained, and when the fleet finally returned back to the core systems, they learned that staying under the radar for a few weeks was indeed a smart idea. To put it bluntly, Tritakian Corporation was pissed off beyond reason about losing their researcher. They pointed fingers at pretty much every other faction in the sector, demanding compensations and breaking trade deals all over the place, especially with the hegemony. Turns out, High Hegemon scout ships were spotted around Pair System, and while no one had any real evidence, many believed that the Admiralty planned this entire operation, which was something that Mr. Cart and his crews could use to divert attention away from themselves. Verona wasn't all that optimistic though, claiming that it was probably only a matter of time before Tritak spies figure out hegemony had nothing to do with it, and would focus their efforts on something else. And, she suspected, some people in the mega corporation were probably already listening to rumors on the wind, and if they heard anything about a mysterious, stealthy ghost fleet, they could probably add 2 and 2 together and figure out that it's the most probable suspect for such a stealthy operation. She remembered how Corp intelligence crews worked, usually slowly but with unpleasantly thorough precision. Featureless men and women in featureless steel-colored suits would follow any lead, no matter how small. Things like purchases of fuel or supplies or random comm signals and sensors reading passed by traveling merchant fleets. She remembered being sent on a mission to assassinate a Ludic admiral once, long ago, and the only thing Tritak knew about them was the fact that they were left-handed. No one knew their name or their gender, but somehow Corp Intel divisions figured out who that was. An older, viciously smart woman who usually posed as a humble carpenter from planet Tartessus. By the time Varuna reached her target, she received intel about the woman 3 generations back, which also, helpfully, included her daily routines and every single potential threat she might encounter on the way. She felt a shiver of dread when she realized that these robotic, emotionless spies could now be used to track her and her friends down. Still, that was a matter for the future. For now, everyone had to focus on their remaining jobs and repairing their ships. The jump, as it turned out, proved to be a lot less gentle for machines than it was for people. Midnight Dissonance said that she lost entire data partition during it. Within a second it was just gone as if it had never existed. She had backups, of course, but she suspected things could become even worse if such a jump happened again. She demanded to be given a warning beforehand next time, so she could shut herself off, though when Mr. Cat asked if that would help, it was clear that she had no idea. And while she didn't know what effect such unproven jumps could have on her, she did provide everyone with a rather disconcerting information. Apparently, when the fleet opened a tear into hyperspace and fell into it, it took 1 second before it emerged on the other side. Problem was, no one seemed to either remember or even register that 1 second, as if it never happened. However, instruments on all ships showed the exact same thing. During this jump, Cart Logistics was lost between both realities for a while, and no one could really tell what happened to it during that time. Mr. Cart ordered everyone to keep this information quiet, but it didn't take long for rumors to start circulating. And while most people reacted with indifference, what's a single second after all, a small bunch of crewmates was ecstatic about it. They were mostly bottom-ring workers, maintenance crews and the like, who believed that, for this one short moment, their fleet went somewhere else, somewhere better. They annoyed Ludics, claiming that they probably went to heaven for a while, and repeatedly asked the boss if he could try and do it again, at least until Varuna and House paid them a visit, and reminded them to keep their mouths shut, if they wanted to receive their pay. And then, of course, was the Tritakian defector, who, when she finally came to after Dr. Discus' procedures, called herself Isis Surya, and then immediately added that it was not a real name. Once all the painkillers wore off, she became a lot calmer and not so scatterbrained, though clearly she was still mostly thinking about something distant during the journey back. Varuna confronted her about that at some point, but Surya simply said that she wondered just what exactly the Academy wanted from her. She explained, in great detail, exactly what she specialized in and how her abilities would be useful, but no one in the fleet could really understand what she was going on about. Even Midnight couldn't follow the sheer, overwhelming amount of technical terms the woman used in every conversation. House, on the other hand, simply thought that she used all those big words just to appear smart, since that's what he would do if he wanted to convince his own future employer about his value. Still, while the defector couldn't really explain just what made her so important to the Academy, at least not in terms anyone could understand, she had no issues selling out her previous partners from Tritachyon. She described in great detail her work in that facility she fled from, and while once again it was difficult for anyone to understand what she said, it was clear that the Corp was doing some shady stuff there. Apparently, over the past decade or two, Tritachyon threw massive amounts of resources at development and improvement of phase shift technology, the mere mention of which was enough to send shivers down spines of almost everyone in the fleet. It wasn't that phase shift tech was something new, it was yet another relic of the domain, a technology that, when properly utilized, could be used to temporarily send a ship, together with its crew, to a sort of parallel universe where time flowed a lot faster. That, of course, had very obvious applications in combat. A vessel could dodge an entire broadside from a battleship by literally jumping into another reality for a few seconds, and then use its boosted speed to appear behind its target, strike at a critical exposed subsystems, and then disappear again. There were not many fleets which used phase-shift vessels, but those that did were known to be absolutely devastating and notoriously hard to kill, for how could you kill something that isn't there when you try to shoot at it? So, one could ask, why not use those ships more? If they can't be targeted and can fly circles around their victims, surely they'd be more useful than usual old rust buckets flying around. The answer, however, was very simple. While it was indeed a very useful tool to have, no one really knew how phase shifting worked. Almost nothing was known about that parallel universe the ships entered while using this tech, but observations performed over decades indicated that it had some lasting effect on both objects and people from our own reality. It was almost unnoticeable during regular operation, but Tritachyon, and Surya's team in particular, learned that every single time a vessel phase shifted, it took slightly more energy to return back to real space. It was, as said, almost unnoticeable, a fraction of a single percent, but also unrelenting. Whatever that other place was, it didn't want to let go of its visitors. Not to mention that crews who served on those ships often told weird, and usually conflicting, stories about their personal experiences during these jumps. And Tritachyon, as the runaway explained, wanted to remove all those issues, and the lab she worked for was one of the many where the corporation tried to find a way to enter that other universe without incurring its wrath in the process, even though no one could really explain just what exactly the executives were looking for out there. Then again, one didn't have to think hard to realize that this could go very badly very quickly for everyone. Mastering phase-shifting technology could give Tritachyon fleet an edge to conquer the entire sector with barely any resistance. Further down the line, if this tech could be miniaturized, it would allow corporate agents to get literally anywhere. If company operatives could ignore physical boundaries, they could walk into most secret places, look over shoulders of politicians and admirals, directly into their secure terminals, and cause incalculable damage in the process. Surya, of course, described it with a lot less dreadful words. If anything, she was excited about the prospect of exploring a completely different universe, but even she could see how this technology could be used to cause problems, and that was why she agreed to flee and work for the Academy, despite knowing how dangerous such an act would be. It was also roughly at this moment, when adrenaline and painkillers wore off, when the woman realized that she should probably stop talking all that much. It was obvious that she was dying to talk to someone about her work for Tritech, perhaps looking for some kind of absolution or someone she could converse about it, but she also understood that some things should perhaps not be discussed openly, especially with random strangers who, as far as she knew, had nothing to do with the Academy and were just a bunch of hired mercs. From that point on, she became increasingly more and more tight-lipped, until finally she withdrew to her cabin and refused to talk to anyone. But with everything that was going on, no one really had time to worry about it, and Mr. Cart was pretty sure that this woman, or her research, would turn up again sooner or later, although, at the same time, he was also sure that it would not be a good thing. Still, none of it really mattered as the fleet slowly made its way back to the core systems, where, upon reaching inhabited worlds, they received an emergency message from Academician Sebastian, who, once again, asked them to go to the Ludic space on their way back and extract one of their researchers from the church custody on Tartessus. He sounded a bit embarrassed about it, like usual, so Mr. Card didn't really have the heart to refuse, especially since monetary reward was promised. Like before though, he decided to leave this conversation to Zala, who, despite seemingly not being part of either the church or the path, seemed to know everyone there. As soon as the fleet entered orbit above the Ludic planet, she contacted the knight who was holding the scientist captive. Except, as it turned out, it was the same scientist as before, and the news about her captivity were a bit exaggerated.
"Ransom? You think we're holding her for a ransom?" the knight on the screen said, looking like someone who missed sleep for weeks now. "Sister, no one is holding that insane woman here. Hell, we want her out, but she refuses to leave. She keeps barging into churches on the surface and records these insane videos she then calls destroying Ludics with facts and logic, and posts them on Global Network. At least 3 bishops, 7 paladins, and 1 deacon admiral want to burn her on the stake, and I'm here trying to avoid a diplomatic incident. So please just take her home before she annoys someone really important."
Needless to say, no one really expected that turn of events, but it of course made that job a lot easier. The scientist didn't want to go, claiming that she was enlightening the savages, so Mr. Cart sent a shuttle down to the surface with Varun and House on board, who then jumped the Galatian researchers in her rented barroom, knocked her unconscious and brought her back into the fleet. Easy job, easy money, even though the woman was decidedly not happy about the whole affair when she finally woke up. But then, finally, it was time to return to the Academy and hand in all the contracts. This time, however, things were a bit different. As soon as the fleet appeared on the sensors of the massive station, several shuttles were sent to meet them midway, and a comm request rang in.
"It's just precautions, Mr. Cart,"
Provost Baird personally explained when Galatian security asked for permission to come aboard.
"Miss Surya, whom you brought back, is indeed a brilliant scientist, or at the very least she claims to be one. But she was also decently high in Tritachian hierarchy, so as you might expect, I'd prefer to make sure she's not a double agent before I allow her to come on board."
The boss wanted to argue, but the defector agreed to the screening process without any questions, and, together with the woman from Tartessus and several data drives from other missions, left on board of the security shuttle. Anahita, meanwhile, asked Mr. Cart to hang around for a few hours. Once everything was straightened up, the company would receive its just rewards, and the provost even hinted at some form of special compensation. So, without anything else to do, Cart Logistics began to slowly orbit the station, which gave everyone on board a chance to rest and repair their vessels. But they didn't have to wait long. A few hours later the comm rang again, and Provost Baird once again invited Mr. Cart and Varuna to her office for tea. The boss tried to worm his way out of it, but she once again hinted at her knowledge of midnight dissonance, but this time she also added a carrot to the stick.
"Mr. Cart, please. Your work on this job with Miss Surya needs to be rewarded, and I have something that I cannot give you over the comms. You can come armed if you don't trust me. Your lieutenant can bring all the weapons she can carry as well. Truth is, we must talk about our mutual future, and I'd rather do that in person than over the comm that can be hacked and listened into."
And, since he couldn't argue with that, he took Verona on the shuttle and flew all the way to Anahita Baird's personal dock, and once again entered her imposing, old-school office. The provost wasn't alone there. Sebastian was there too, wearing a flowery apron and making tea. He blushed immediately when he saw them, but Verona just gave him a wink and a thumbs up. And if his face was red before, now it turned into a color of a ripe beet. Anahita didn't bother though, and welcomed them all and pointed at the table nearby. This time, Mr. Cart noticed she even prepared a special emergency induction port just for him. The old woman seemed happy, ecstatic even. Recovering that Tritachian defector clearly put her in a good mood.
"Please don't mind Sebastian, he's just working on his people skills,"
she said as he placed teacups on the table. She then sat down in her leather chair, took a sip and urged everyone else to sit down too.
"Mr. Katz, Miss Europa, I want to officially extend my gratitude. Well, no, not just mine, the entire Academy's. What you did out there moved our plans forwards a decade or two, and for that you must all be rewarded."
She urged Sebastian forward, and he pulled out a datapad and transferred a large sum of credits to Mr. Cart's account. More than they agreed upon before. Verona wanted to relax when she saw that, but something told her Anahita wasn't done talking yet.
"As it stands, we will be able to begin our proper work pretty much instantly, all thanks to you. The future, Mr. Cart, is indeed bright for us, and for entire Persian sector. But while we're here celebrating the future, I feel like we must first talk about the past."
Her eyes narrowed, and her voice once again became cold. Sebastian took a step back, as if trying to take cover behind Provost's massive wooden desk.
"I had a talk with Miss Surya, and she regaled with me an amazing tale of a fleet of ragtag ships jumping into hyperspace in a spot where such a jump was impossible,"
the old woman continued. Verona put her teacup back on the table and tensed, expecting troubles in the coming seconds.
"I have had my suspicions about you before, Mr. Cart."
Anahita pointed a calloused finger at him.
"Ever since I saw you. Hell, even before that when I heard about you. So many oddities like your knowledge about these clones, something that no one, not even our own academicians, knew. Then it was your technical aptitude, and now, finally, the final piece of the puzzle, your ability to jump into hyperspace without using a gravity well. In all our archives, we have found evidence that only domain-approved pilots would teach this skill."
The provost stood up and leaned across the table, staring at Mr. Cart without blinking.
"You can stop hiding now, Mr. Cart, or whatever the hell your real name is. You're from there. You're from the domain. And not just geographically, but from that time, from before the gates shut down."
Verona closed her eyes. She wondered how far they would all have to run if her boss asked her to kill the provost right now. "And if you were right, then what?" Mr. Cart said, and Verona opened her eyes and stared at him confused. This was not how she expected things to go.
"What? What?" he asks.
The provost's asks were wild, but there was flame of victory glowing in them.
So much! With your knowledge we could learn oh so much, restore so much. I can't even imagine how much we could learn from you, and then use it to rebuild the domain."
In a silence that followed, Mr. Cart's quiet, bitter laughter sounded like a growl of incoming blizzard. You could feel temperature falling down several degrees from this cold, humorless chuckle. "And that, Madam Provost, is the problem," he finally said. "Because what you fail to see is that domain was not an utopia you believe it was, nowhere close. You talk about rebuilding it, but what if it doesn't deserve to be rebuilt? You want to know more about it? Sure, I can tell you all I know, which admittedly is not much, but I can guarantee you one thing. You are not going to like it." And then he told them everything he knew, and when he finished, Anahita Baird could tell one thing for sure. He was right. She really, truly didn't like what she heard.